Hi everyone, my name's Jess. I'm an intern with OC Habitats, and today I'm going to be telling you a bit about sea urchins. So I want to start off with a bit of background. A sea urchin is an invertebrate, which just means they have no backbone. An invertebrate is any animal that doesn't have a backbone. They are in the phylum Echinodermata, which is more commonly known as echinoderms, along with some of our favorite echinoderms, sea stars, sand dollars, and sea cucumbers. There are more echinoderms out there, but these are just really common ones that we're probably all familiar with. They can be found all over the world. There are over 900 species worldwide, and they are primarily found in the intertidal zone of, of beaches in the ocean. So the intertidal zone is going to be the area of beach where when the tide is high, it is completely submerged, whereas when the tide is low, it's completely exposed. So that lower portion of the beach, things like tide pools, those are considered in the intertidal zone. That is the intertidal zone. So this is a bit more about what an echinoderm is and what makes it special. They have two main features that set them apart. The first thing, their water vascular system, and their five-sided radial symmetry is the other. So with their water vascular system, they essentially use water the way we use blood. So they pull in water through this madreporite and distribute it through their radial canals and push it out to their tube feet. And I'll be talking about tube feet more later on. They have a lot of functions, but they use the water to extend and retract them. And then for five-sided radial symmetry, this is significant because it's a lot more secure, so to speak, as opposed to bilateral symmetry, which is what we have, right? If you were to section us, we'd be pretty symmetrical on both sides. That's the same thing that you cut them into 5 portions and they're symmetrical on each side. And it just has a stronger structure, so that way they are able to withstand more stress. With that is they also have an oral and an aboral side. So on the sea urchin right here on the right-hand side of this graphic, this hole right here is their oral side. That's not how big their mouth is, but that's where the mouth would be if this was an intact urchin. And on the other side is the aboral side. And just in case you are curious what aboral means, the direct definition is relating to or denoting the side or end that is furthest from the mouth, especially in animals that lack clear upper and lower sides, such as echinoderms. So I mentioned that urchins can be found all over the world and that there are 900 species, and these are just 4 examples of those. First, we have the Atlantic purple sea urchin, which is found in the Atlantic and Mediterranean. It looks fairly similar to the purple sea urchin we have here, which I'll show you later on. The green sea urchin, which is found in the northern polar regions. Kaina, which is the urchin found in New Zealand, and the Chilean sea urchin, which is found in Chile and Peru. Now for urchins we have here in Orange County, we have the Pacific purple sea urchin and the red sea urchin. The red sea urchin, as you can see, has 2 scientific names. They kind of use them interchangeably, but they are both the same species. They are referring to the same species. So here on the left, the purple sea urchin is going to be quite a bit smaller than our red sea urchin. Their spines are shorter, and in terms of just general size, their test, which is their skeleton, is smaller as opposed to the red sea urchin, which you can see their spines are a lot longer. They can be a few inches long. Here's some anatomy, some general anatomy we'll be going into a bit. We have right here the test, which is their skeletal structure, which is what you see right here on the right-hand side. They have their gonads right here, their spines and their tube feet. The spines are going to be the green. The tube feet are going to be these things are the little suction cups that you can see. They have the radial canals right here that we talked about earlier with their water vascular system. Their mouth is at the bottom of their body, which is known as Aristotle's lantern, and their anus is at the top of their body. So here's a better picture of their test. You can see the little bubbles where their spines used to be. This is their skeletal structure, and if you ever see one of these on the beach, you know it's an urchin now. So their spines and their 2 feet are super important. Their 2 feet are, in my opinion, one of the coolest things about them. Their spines are used for protection, and they are able to move them. They are poisonous, so if you were to step on one, you would treat it kind of like a stingray sting. It's not gonna kill you. It's gonna, hurt, but you would just soak it in hot water and vinegar to help break down the spines. Their 2 feet are used for a variety of things. The first being movement, so they use them to move themselves along surfaces. They are not sedentary creatures like I originally thought when I saw an urchin in the wild for the first time. They do move. They also use them for gas exchange, so they breathe through them. And they also use them for sight, so to speak. So they have these light receptors all over their body where they can detect changes in shadows, which could mean that there's food or a predator nearby, and they're able to move their spines and their 2 feet able in whatever direction to be prepared. So here's a better internal picture of their anatomy. Right here in orange, these are the gonads, which is the only edible part of an urchin, and they're actually pretty common in Asian cooking. They're known as uni, and they're also known as roe. So if you ever want to try sea urchin, get some uni. I've heard mixed reviews about it, but I've personally never tried it. Here is their mouth right here. It's known as Aristotle's lantern. They have 5 really sharp teeth that they use to, scrape algae off rocks and things. And it reminded me a lot of this creature from Return of the Jedi in Star Wars. And I don't think that there was any correlation. I don't think they used the urchin as like an inspiration for this, but for the purpose of this presentation, I'm gonna say that they did. So here's a quick little video of a sea urchin eating. And you can see how it uses its 2 feet to move the seaweed. This is some seaweed right here to its mouth. And then if you look close, you can see their little teeth. They're super sharp. It's kind of weird looking, but it's super cool. So you saw a little bit of their diet in that portion right there. They eat a lot of algae, which is also known as seaweed and kelp. They'll also eat algae off rocks, and they also do eat animal matter. So things like plankton and barnacles they'll eat. They have a pretty cool life history in terms of reproduction. They release their sperm and eggs, which are also known as gametes, up into the water column. And in the water column, they'll kind of swirl around, and then they'll be fertilized and become embryos. And they'll start off as larvae. And they have 2 different larval stages, as you can see here. When they reach the second larval stage, they start to grow kind of like what looks like a little urchin on the inside. And their 2 feet just start to form, and they will reach their 2 feet out of their one opening that they have for eating and excreting waste. They'll reach their 2 feet out, and they kind of flip inside out, and at that point become benthic, which means seafloor dwelling. So, and then become, what we know as an urchin. So I'll show you a quick little video of that. It's super cool. I'm gonna have to slow it down a bit. So those are its 2 feet right there. And if you look super close, you'll see when it flips. Right there, it flipped. And that is actually a sea star, but the urchins do it the same way. So it'll show you what an urchin looks like. See right there, that's an urchin. And then it's going to become what we are familiar with seeing as an urchin. So sea urchins have both a positive and a negative effect on our ocean ecosystems. They are native. We do want them here because they help maintain a healthy balance of algae when the food system is functioning the way it's supposed to. And that is a really important factor because when it's not, we see what happens in the picture to the right, which is they completely wipe out kelp forests if their population gets out of hand and just gets really large, which has happened all along the coast of California before. And this is super unfortunate. Our kelp forests are super important because they provide a habitat for countless species. They also provide oxygen for us and also purify the water. So without them, it has a pretty detrimental effect. Sea urchins have a variety of predators, one of them being the California sheephead, which is a fish we have here, a sunstar, sea otters, and humans, of course. And sea otters are one of their most important predators. They are what is known as a keystone species, which is a species on which other species in an ecosystem largely depend, such that if it were removed, the ecosystem would change drastically. And that's exactly what happened with our sea otters here in California. So here is the past and present distribution of sea otters. The black and white stripes are where they used to live. So they used to go all the way down to Mexico, all the way up to Canada. And now they only live in this small portion right here in the central coast of California, which is super unfortunate. They were hunted to near extinction, and extinction in those portions in the 1870s as a result of the fur trade, which is really unfortunate. And there's been talk of reintroducing them down here, but a feasibility study done by the US Department of Fish and Wildlife essentially decided that it wasn't going to be worth it, so to speak, for the main reason being ecosystem resilience and predator redundancy, which means that there's more sea urchin predators down here that we wouldn't need to reintroduce otters. They're okay, just staying where they're at. And I was also told that for a long while, otters weren't even allowed to come back down here because the fishermen didn't like them, essentially because they would catch all the fish or other things that they were hoping to catch. And so if one kind of ventured down here, they'd have to call somebody and the otter would have to be moved back to where it was allowed. So there was like a boundary, so to speak. And that time period where they weren't allowed here passed fairly recently. So now it's okay for them to venture down here, but they don't really, stick around. However, I think that this could be revisited because there was a major die-off in sea stars, which is one of their predators, if you remember, and that was caused by wasting disease, which sea urchins were also affected by. And wasting disease is a complete degradation of their spines and their toothy, as you can see here on the right-hand side. They're basically reduced to just their test. And they are also affected by black spot disease, which is localized spine loss. So you can see here on their test that they have a black lesion, and then that area, there's no spines. So ocean acidification is a result of increased carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. The ocean will absorb it, and it will cause the pH of the ocean to become lower, which means more acidic. And that will affect the calcium carbonate buildup in a lot of creatures, and including sea urchins, their chest and their teeth and their spines are made up of calcium carbonate. So it'll break that down and become weak, and they will have trouble eating. They won't be able to defend themselves as well, and their chest will sort of degrade over time. So that's another issue. So what are we at OCH doing? We are working in collaboration with Nancy Caruso from Get Inspired to keep an eye on our sea urchin populations down here in Orange County. We're using methods very similar to that you see in this picture, where we go out to the tide pools, lay down a transect line, put a quadrat, and count the urchins in each one. And this is just to get a preliminary idea of where our urchin populations are at, so that way later on we can take that into consideration and figure out what we want to do. Here's some more information if you're interested. The top link is our website. You can get involved with any volunteering. You just go to the Get Involved section of our website. So other resources, this top one right here is the feasibility study I talked about. I think it's a really interesting topic and a pretty quick read. Here in the second one, we have more about sea urchins and their effect on our kelp forests. The bottom one here is just some general facts. And Nancy Caruso also did a presentation about the restoration work she does.